Okay, so during my 1 million subscriber live stream, as short as it was something like maybe 25 minutes, wasn't anything outrageous, but I had talked about how I wanted to begin shifting my focus from Marvel Comics away from all new, all different Marvel and focus on some classic stories. And we're gonna test the waters here a little bit. I wanna do the origin of Gorr the Godbutcher. And the reason why is because this guy's amazing. We did the Godbutcher storyline as like an episode of the Rundown, which was fun, but I also wanted to, I've always wanted to do like an actual like tried and true Thor the Godbutcher, or I guess Thor God of Thunder, the Godbutcher storyline explained video. Like I've been wanting to do this for quite a while, and I've been trying to find a way to fit it in. The issue with this is that Benny over Comic Storian is doing Thor God of Thunder. There we go. He's doing that when the Thor movie comes out, I think. And we're actually gonna kind of switch, because what I'm gonna do when the Thor movie comes out is we're gonna start with Thor Ragnarok and then just work our way all the way up through Straczynski's run, up to this point to Godbutcher. Assuming you guys care about this, then we'll just do this, Godbutcher run, and then we'll do like God Bomb, and then we'll do, Last Days of Midgard, and there's one more, I think it is. I think Last Days of Midgard is the last part, but we're just gonna test the waters, and we're gonna experiment and see how you guys respond to us doing some classic stories with regards to Thor stuff. So Gorr the Godbutcher is a pretty cool character. He's pretty cool. He's pretty interesting, and he's pretty tragic at the same time. And the reason why is because of the fact that this was a guy who basically just ran across the cosmos, killing every single god he found. And it was one of the most interesting stories to have ever been done with this character. But what this does, at least what this comic does, is it just kind of goes back to the early days, and it really tells us how Gorr ended up from being, how he went from being just a regular guy to eventually becoming a murderer who was just killing gods all across the cosmos. And so what we do is we jump to about 3,000 years in the past, and we actually pick up with this pretty dark and pretty sinister environment. I mean, it's not dark in terms of, light or anything like that, but it's a very harsh environment. It's full of all kinds of predators. The people who live on it are nomads, meaning they just travel from one location to the next, simply trying to make their way and trying to survive. In this instance, what ends up happening is the mother of Gorr is basically killed by some of the natural beasts that just kind of roam around the landscape, monsters or, whatever the natural predators are. But this in turn instills in him a lack of faith in gods. And the reason why is because as they make their way across this planet and as they try to reach their chosen place, their eternal land, whatever you want to call it, his wife is of course pregnant with what seems to be, their third or fourth child. The issue with this is that as they're traveling, his wife basically steps on some loose rocks and she falls to her death. And so all that's left to him is for his son, or at least for him to carry his son, his oldest child, as well as what other villagers are left, and try to make their way to their chosen destination. But Gorr the Godbutcher has basically just lost faith in gods. And the reason why is because the people pray day after day. They constantly pray for sustenance. They constantly pray for nourishment. The son of Gorr dies in his arms because he doesn't have water. He doesn't have any food. They're basically just living this really terrible and really crappy life. But the faith of the tribe is what gets them through. They've got their own religious leaders, their own spiritual leaders. They've got guys that basically say, look, we have to pray to the gods, and if we do, then the gods will give us what we need to survive. Now, something that Jason Aaron is doing with this little bit of a story is he's kind of going back and forth with things, right? Like he's kind of bordering on this realm of literal and metaphorical, in the sense that where, these guys basically say, look, we kind of have to pray to the gods, and we have to, beg that they will give us the things that we need. In reality, the gods will not provide them, and Gorr doesn't even believe they exist. All he does is he just looks around at a really harsh environment. Now, it's entirely possible that this planet is not hospitable, which begs the question, how did the people, how did they arrive to where they are now? How did they evolve this far? We're not given an answer to that. It could be they just crash landed here and they've been there for, several generations, and they're effectively dying off because they can't live in the environment. There's any number of reasons why this is the case. But for Gorr himself, he looks around and says, if the gods really cared about us, if the gods really listened to our prayers and listened to our hopes, we wouldn't be dying of starvation. We wouldn't be dying of dehydration. They would bless us with water. They would bless us with rain. They'd give us some sign that they actually exist. Now, of course, this in response is meant to basically be viewed as heresy, but it also kind of makes sense that people would respond that way. And the reason why is because what Gorr is doing is effectively taking away their hope. The people that he's walking with, the gods that they believe in, are the only thing that stands between them and just giving up. It's the only thing that stands between them and just saying, yeah, there's no help coming, and then just laying down and dying. Believing that the gods will answer their prayers if they pray long enough is the only hope they have that their lives will get better. And that makes sense. Nobody wants to believe that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. People want to believe that there's a better tomorrow on the horizon. That's just the nature of people. Even if there isn't, even if there's no hope of getting out of their circumstance, people want to believe that there is. Now, of course, Gorr answering this and basically saying that hope is nonsensical leads to him being cast out by his own tribe. And so on the verge of dying, he's suddenly met met by the arrival of two gods. Now, this is where Jason Aaron also plays it a little fast and loose, because how these guys are depicted, one gold, one black, is clearly an allegory to good and evil. That's clearly what it's designed to be. But this also shows this sort of, struggle that's been going on between the two of them for eons and eons and eons. But for those of you guys who read The Unworthy Thor, and those of you guys who read, where Nick Fury had basically told Thor Gorr was right, this is really what it's kind of hearkening down to. These gods, the gods of this planet, of this realm, or this region, may very well exist, but they probably don't care about the goings-on of people on the mundane ground, who are just kind of living out their regular lives. I mean, how many comics have you seen where Thor rescues a homeless man, or where Thor gives money to a homeless man, or he saves him? How many comics have there been where Thor saves some little girl who's in an abusive situation with parents, or some guy who's being beat up by a bully or something like that? You don't see those comics. Those comics don't exist. The only comics that you see are comics where Thor is fighting alongside the Avengers, where he's fighting in Asgard, he's going against, the Frost Giants or something like that. It's Jason Aaron hitting at the nature of the comics, the stories that we've seen, and said, look, maybe it is true. If the gods exist, then why don't they care about the small guys? Why don't they care about the little guys? Why do they just fight amongst themselves with all their nonsense? And that's really what's being hit at home here with regards to Gorr, because one of these gods survives and begs for help. The immediate response of Gorr is, why would I help you? Where were you at when my mom died? Where were you at when my wife died? Where were you at when all these different members of these tribes had died? But in truth, it would be like screaming at Thor because a man's wife was run over by a car. Could Thor have really saved her? Possibly, but there's no guarantee that he could have. It's really just the wrath and the anger and the emotion and the pain that Gorr has felt over the course of his life, and just experiencing loss after loss after loss after loss, that all really comes to a head. And so ultimately what ends up happening here is that some of this power, at least it seems to be that way, of this dark god basically allows itself to be used by Gorr, and it actually takes the form of what's called the Necro Sword. Now, of course, the Necro Sword will be a major aspect of his character going forward in the realm of Thor, the Godbutcher of that particular story. But Gorr, having this power, basically gives him the ability of a god. The difference is that he doesn't quite know how to use it yet, and that's the importance. Is that over the course of the next several millennia, he'll basically begin to harness his skills. And so what ends up happening is that we actually transition to another realm, to a different universe called Earth 14412, 14412, I think is what it's called. And we actually pick up, in the future of this universe, where we basically have like Volstagg, who's normally part of the Warriors 3, but is clearly in shape and trimmed down, who's being tortured and then eventually killed by Gorr. And he basically keeps kind of taunting, Volstagg and so on and so forth. And Volstagg even makes the claim, look, if you have the power of a god and you're going around and you're killing other gods, what do you think that makes you? Do you think it makes you a good guy, or do you think it makes you a bad guy? It's basically saying you have essentially become what it is that you hate the most. Now, this particular universe, not this situation, but this particular universe is extremely important. And the reason why is because of the fact that over the course of Godbutcher and Godbomb, Jason Aaron will span 3 different time periods. He'll span in the early days of Thor, back when he was younger. He'll go in the present day, and then he'll go in the future. The future in this particular universe where this matters, the reason why this is important is because this is a reality where Loki destroyed everything on Earth. He wiped out all life on Earth, all the superheroes, all the humans, the whole 9 yards. Everything is gone. Loki literally killed everybody. That's where things are different. That's where it branches off from. That's what makes that universe different. Everything else in, Thor the Godbutcher is, the past of the main Marvel universe, or the present day in the main Marvel universe. This is in the future of an alternate universe. And so that's one of the cool things about that little tidbit. But anyway, guys, I figured it'd be kind of a cool video to make. I thought it'd be pretty enjoyable to talk about the origin of Gorr the Godbutcher. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty short. The reason why is because his character gets a huge amount of development in Thor the Godbutcher, in the actual, Thor God of Thunder. I keep saying Thor the Godbutcher. He gets a lot of character development in Thor God of Thunder Volume 1 in the Godbutcher storyline. Really, it's the story that kind of made him so cool. Art is amazing by Assad Ribic. It looks absolutely insane. But in my mind, it's probably the greatest Thor story ever told. Like it's super cool. It's pretty amazing. But anyway, guys, we're gonna go ahead and bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.